help Gorbachev.
A December summit at sea, a deal to raise slowly the minimum wage, and the Japanese buy Rockefeller Center. This is the CBS Evening News. Dan Rather reporting. Good evening. George Bush and Mikhail Gorbachev will hold a summit December 2nd and 3rd. They'll meet aboard ships in the Mediterranean. No fixed agenda. A warm-up, it is said, for possibly a full arms control summit in the spring. This represents a change from President Bush's previous position, no agenda, no summit. It comes against a backdrop of the rapidly changing face of communism worldwide and talk about Gorbachev's survival amid political turmoil and economic chaos without Western help. For his part, President Bush has been criticized by some for a lack of boldness in addressing these sweeping changes. Leslie Stahl begins our coverage of the coming summit at sea. Leslie?
Dan, administration officials say President Bush has decided it's important that he be seen trying to help Gorbachev, that he decided not to wait for the already scheduled summit this spring to throw the Soviet leader an oar. They're calling it a non-summit get-together, 2 days on U.S. and Soviet naval ships in the Mediterranean, the superpower leaders locked in hours of face-to-face chats.
There will not be a certain agenda on it. We'll simply sit down and I'll give him my views on the changes that are taking place in Eastern Europe, and certainly I'm most interested in getting his.
But that's precisely the kind of unstructured meeting Mr. Bush has argued against for months. He just changed his mind.
I don't want to have two gigantic ships pass in the night because of failed communication. Tom?
The president's turnaround began in July in Poland. Lech Wałęsa told him that reform in Eastern Europe was progressing only because Gorbachev allowed it. In Hungary, the leaders implored him to help Gorbachev succeed. On the flight home, the president drafted a letter proposing an informal meeting. Gorbachev accepted 2 weeks later.
I think it's the right thing to be doing. As I say, there was a time when I wasn't sure that it was, but with this rapidity of change, I don't want to miss something.
What's curious is that some administration officials, including the vice president, have been sending negative signals about Gorbachev's survivability. But today, everyone was on the reservation.
This is an important way of doing business.
The president denied he was stampeded into an early meeting by critics who've called him too timid. Today, the critics applauded.
It doesn't mean that Gorbachev's problems will be solved. It doesn't mean the world will be a safer place afterwards. But it does mean that this will give additional support to Gorbachev inside the Soviet Union.
The president and all his advisors are still wary of unstructured meetings. They are determined to avoid what happened at Reykjavik, where they feel Ronald Reagan was stampeded by Gorbachev's unexpected and radical arms control proposals. That's why Mr. Bush says he has an understanding with Gorbachev that they'll leave arms control for the later, more formal summit in the spring. Dan?
Thank you, Leslie. Announcement of the Bush-Gorbachev summit was made simultaneously in Moscow today, but with a different spin. CBS News Moscow correspondent Barry Peterson has more on the view of the summit as seen from over there.
Foreign Minister Shevardnadze made one thing perfectly clear. Mikhail Gorbachev is not looking for an economic handout from George Bush to prop up perestroika.
Would you like me to be frank? When they say to help or to assist the Soviet Union, it tramples on our national pride. For this meeting has nothing to do with perestroika directly.
Western observers might be forgiven for thinking Gorbachev needs economic help. The Kremlin is so strapped for cash, there is talk of selling off state-owned black Volgas issued to bureaucrats. Soviets are hoarding food, fearing shortages. The press worries that energy is reported in short supply because of continuing coal strikes and a summertime natural gas explosion that cut off a vital pipeline. Some fear people in this country may freeze this winter. A summit might distract Soviets from their problems, or it could backfire on Gorbachev, whose foreign policy success is matched by growing domestic failure.
There is a risk that Gorbachev is spending so much time abroad that he could in fact be undermining his own personal political position at home.
What Gorbachev wants from this summit is progress in arms reduction so he can cut his defense budget, money he desperately needs to jumpstart this nation's economy. Military might rumble through Red Square tonight, a rehearsal for the November parade that celebrates the Bolshevik Revolution. The Soviets hope this summit helps in cutting a deal with the Americans, before this military superpower goes broke. Barry Peterson, CBS News, Moscow.
The new East German leader, Egon Krenz, flew to Moscow today to meet Gorbachev. Krenz has vowed to preserve the Communist Party in East Germany, even in the face of an exploding movement for freedom and democracy. 500,000 East Germans joined street demonstrations in 7 cities last night. From London, Tom Fenton reports the revolutionary turmoil in Eastern Europe may have been the main reason European allies urged President Bush to move up his summit schedule. Tom?
Dan, well, for once, it's not the danger of a nuclear holocaust that made America's allies urge a superpower meeting. It's those amazing changes in Eastern Europe. The upheaval in East Germany, the flight to freedom with thousands voting with their feet, the unexpected defeat of communism in Poland and Hungary. Europeans were concerned that President Bush was being too slow to react and told him so at a NATO meeting last summer. Now there's a sense of relief that the two leaders will meet.
Is changing so rapidly that I think there is a need to have an early contact, informal contact between the leaders of both major powers.
You need everybody to know what the other leader is thinking, is believing, because this makes the world safer. And especially in Europe, we are depending so much on a good West-East relationship.
For the time being, disarmament has become a secondary issue. The Warsaw Pact is already unilaterally getting rid of weapons. East Germany did it spectacularly last week, trashing 50 MiG fighters. Europeans fear the political changes are coming so rapidly that there's a danger of Eastern Europe sliding into chaos and bloodshed.
Nobody can foresee what the situation, even the most basic situation, is going to be like in East Germany, in Poland, in Hungary, even the Soviet Union, 3 or 4 months from now.
There's a sense of urgency here that the Europeans believe the White House doesn't share, especially about Poland, which faces a critical food shortage this winter if aid doesn't arrive within weeks. Dan?
Tom Fenton, thanks. A notation that the Washington Post broke the story this morning before any announcement that a summit was going to be held. In Washington, our State Department correspondent Bill Plant has more now about what and who is behind President Bush's surprise change to go ahead with an unstructured summit in December. Bill?
Well, Dan, the plans for this meeting were so tightly held, only 4 or 5 of Mr. Bush's top aides knew that virtually no advance planning has been done for this. That means that most members of the administration found out about it just today, and now they're scrambling. They've just started looking at the logistics, the ships, the shore locations, and the like. That may be why some of the officials were apparently not in the know and seemed to be using a different script. Dan?
Thanks, Bill. Back with more news in a moment, and another in our series of people who live their lives to help others, the best of us.
For years, we've been telling you how the four-wheel drive Subaru helps the U.S. ski team get to their events early. Yet at the 1989 World Championships, the U.S. team was not the first to arrive. The Norwegians beat us, the French beat us, as did the Italians and the Swedes. How'd they do it? That was the year we lent them all a Subaru.
That's what we're baking for breakfast. It's made with whole oats, plus raisins, nuts, and spices. It's a cereal. New Oat Bake, a nutritious new oat cereal from Kellogg's. It's the only whole oat cereal that's baked, for a rich taste you won't find in any other oat cereal. New Kellogg's Oat Bake, the whole oat cereal with the crunchy baked taste.
I can't tell you how much I love these guys, but I can tell you it's 25% less than before.
Love your family 25% less with Fleischmann's Light. 25% less saturated fat, salt, and calories than regular margarine. And 0 cholesterol. Fleischmann's Light.
If your doctor has recommended fiber laxatives and you like the results, but you don't like those glasses of thick liquid, now there's FiberCon. Concentrated fiber action in easy-to-swallow tablets. Ask your doctor about FiberCon.
A compromise forced by President Bush with congressional leaders today to slowly raise the national minimum wage for the first time since 1981. This follows Mr. Bush's veto of Congress's last minimum wage increase bill and months of stalemate about it until now. Chief Washington correspondent Bob Schieffer reports what's in this new minimum wage package.
Today's compromise is good news. It was a long time coming for workers like these, the first increase in the minimum wage in almost 9 years. Congressional Democrats called the deal the best they could get, but conceded many workers would be disappointed.
Many of them will see this modest increase as too little too late, a Halloween compromise that is more trick than treat.
Under the compromise, the minimum wage will rise from $3.35 an hour to $3.80 an hour on April 1st next year, and will top out at $4.25 an hour in 1991, the limit the president had insisted on.
It also will mean an increase for lots of other Americans who earn above the minimum wage, but will now get an increase because the minimum wage has gone up.
The compromise legislation will also, for the first time, allow employers to pay teenagers a lower training wage for up to 6 months after they're first hired. Starting in April, the teenage rate will be $3.35 an hour and will rise to $3.61 in April of 1991.
The president, as you know, had said he would go with a reasonable increase. He has done that, and I think this puts the issue to rest now.
And that was very good news for Capitol Republicans. Even Mrs. Dole's husband, the Republican leader in the Senate, suggested today that continuing to block an increase in the minimum wage was putting Republicans in a bad light, especially while they're pushing a cut in the capital gains tax rate. Bob Schieffer, CBS News, Capitol Hill.
Slow but steady, no recession. That's the official outlook for the economy reflected today in the government's chief forecasting gauge. The Commerce Department said its index of leading indicators edged up 0.2% in September. Meanwhile, the department also reported that new home sales plunged 14% last month, the sharpest decline in almost 8 years.
Jan Trumpeter is learning all about her antifreeze. The hard way.
Why is this happening to me?
Don't push your luck. Guarantee it with Advanced Formula Prestone.
It's happening now. The Crab Lovers Festival at Red Lobster. King crab from icy Arctic waters, steaming, succulent. Delicate snow crab to dip, drip, and savor. And now get your taste of our sweet, meaty Pacific Dungeness. We've created 8 crab and seafood combinations starting at just $6.95. They're here now and only at Red Lobster. Friday through Sunday, try our crab and shrimp special, just $10.95.
Are your teeth sensitive? Do they hurt? Sensodyne toothpaste can help stop the domino effect that can start with sensitivity. Then pain can make you stop brushing and can lead to tooth loss. Sensodyne toothpaste helps stop the pain and the domino effect.
I've never been that much of a cereal eater, or even breakfast for that matter. But then I read 2 or 3 different articles about oat bran. And I thought to myself, why would you not eat this stuff?
Medical reports have shown oat bran can be important to your good health. Kellogg's Common Sense Oat Bran has more oat bran than any leading ready-to-eat cereal.
You know, I get up 15 minutes early just so I can do this.
New Common Sense Oat Bran. A sensible thing to do.
With Richard Nixon at his side, China's Deng Xiaoping today criticized the United States, blasted what Deng views as unwise Americans who support the crushed movement for freedom and democracy inside China. CBS News Beijing correspondent John Sheehan reports on today's Nixon-Deng meeting.
Supreme Leader Deng Xiaoping told former President Richard Nixon that if the United States wants to repair damaged relations with China, then it is up to the American government to take the initiative.
We should put an end to the past and open a new chapter.
Deng blamed the U.S. for the bad state of relations since the Army massacre of unarmed protesters last June and accused the United States of being deeply involved in the rebellion. Mr. Nixon plans to give President Bush a complete report on his meetings with the Chinese leadership.
The important thing now is to find those areas in which we do agree, because this relationship must be sustained.
There are still armed soldiers surrounding the U.S. embassy compounds. The embassy protested to the Chinese government that in the last few days, some of the soldiers have pointed their automatic weapons at children of U.S. diplomats. Neither Richard Nixon nor the Chinese revealed what they said about the fate of dissident Fang Lizhi, who has been given sanctuary in the embassy since the slaughter of the protesters. He faces arrest and possible execution if captured. One test of how much the Chinese leaders want to restore good relations with the United States would be whether they are willing to negotiate a safe exit from China for Fang and his wife. Having lost more than $1 billion in tourist revenue since the army occupied the capital 5 months ago, Chinese authorities have begun to withdraw some of the troops. At midnight Beijing time, soldiers at Tiananmen Square were replaced by a civilian security force called the People's Armed Police. Officials emphasized, however, that the city remains under martial law. John Sheehan, CBS News, Beijing.
Yet another U.S. Navy vessel involved in a training accident at sea today. That's the third in 3 days. The latest, 3 U.S. sailors on the aircraft carrier Eisenhower were swept overboard during exercises this morning 90 miles southeast of Cape Hatteras. 2 sailors rescued, 1 still missing. Also swept overboard and lost 38 non-nuclear Sparrow and Sidewinder air-to-air missiles.
Victor Kayam, what's the ultimate shaving gift?
The Remington Microscreen Ultimate. Its 2 screens shave as close as a blade or your money back. No other shaver makes that promise.
Now I know why he bought the company.
Remington.
Hey, this isn't your regular old party mix. No, this is Crispix Mix. And Crispix is toasted crisp, so it makes your party mix extremely crunchy. Thank you.
You are about to see the most important words in pain relief in 100 years. Motrin IB, no prescription needed. The doctor-recommended pain reliever in Motrin is now available in non-prescription strength Motrin IB. 1 Motrin IB is as effective as 2 regular aspirin for relief of headache and muscle ache, and much gentler on your stomach. New Motrin IB, tablets or caplets. Doctor-recommended pain relief.
When you're constipated, you're not yourself. Constipation makes you feel crabby, cranky, slow, and sluggish. Feel more comfortable with Dulcolax. Dulcolax is the only leading laxative with a comfort coating designed to protect your stomach. A comfort coating and overnight relief, so you feel buoyant, bouncy, light, and loving.
In other words, your normal self again.
Dulcolax, the comfort-coated laxative.
The Sandinista government of Nicaragua and the U.S.-backed Contra rebels each accused the other of violating a ceasefire today. Nicaraguan President Daniel Ortega went to the scene of what he says was a Contra raid on a village. The government said 4 civilians were killed and 5 wounded. Ortega says Contra attacks are mounting and he is threatening not to renew the current ceasefire, which expires at midnight tonight. At his news conference today, President Bush said if Ortega carries out his threat, he, Mr. Bush, will immediately reevaluate the issue of military aid to the Contras. The Rockefeller family has sold one of America's most famous pieces of real estate. 4 blocks of high-rise American history and fantasy in the heart of New York City. Ray Brady reports it was a straight-up business deal, an American dream for Japanese cash.
Dateline, New York City.
Opened in the grim days of the Great Depression, its soaring steel, stone, and glass buildings stood as a symbol of American courage and of hope for a nation worn down by bad times. But today, that symbol, Rockefeller Center, is controlled by new owners, Japan's Mitsubishi Estate Company.
People will recognize that this was a deal which is in everybody's interest, and most particularly in the interest of New York City and our country at large.
Still, the sale's bringing protests.
Because why is the Japanese buying everything out here, you know? I mean, there's nothing left for the Americans.
It's smart for them. It's dumb for us, but that's what's going on.
I feel kind of sad. It is an American landmark.
For the Rockefeller family, the sale means $846 million in cash for 19 buildings and a skating rink in a midtown Manhattan, much of whose heart and many of whose most famous buildings already are in Japanese hands. Names like Tiffany's and the Algonquin Hotel, more than $7 billion worth. And it's not just New York. Nationwide, Japan is second only to Canada as a foreign owner of U.S. commercial real estate, with such properties as the $500 million Citicorp Plaza building in Los Angeles.
It's good for us. It, in many cases, creates jobs. It's not losing our national security. It's bringing fresh money in, and it really helps our economy. It doesn't hurt it.
Rockefeller Center with the Radio City Music Hall has been a mecca for American tourists. Now we don't own it. Will the Rockettes become geishas?
But that's not likely. Rockefeller Center seems sure to keep its name and its traditions for years to come. Ray Brady, CBS News, New York.
I got a load of this. A court in London today heard testimony that a high-tech horse player fixed a race with his own invention, an ultrasonic stun gun. This was the race at the Royal Ascot track last June. The leading horse suddenly veered off course and threw his jockey. This was the device, the lenses in a pair of binoculars replaced by tiny, powerful loudspeakers. According to testimony, the speakers sent out a high-pitched screech, inaudible to humans, but terrifying to the horse it was aimed at. The defendant said he devised the gun using information from an encyclopedia.
There's no reason in the world why we shouldn't continue to do the things that we enjoy doing in life. Granted, we have the odd aches and pains. Well, my goodness, I mean, what can we expect at our age? But I find that if I have Bufferin, a cup of tea and a couple of Bufferin, and I can continue. And Bufferin, my brand of aspirin, allows me to do the things that I want to do. I really wouldn't be without it for that reason.
Bufferin, so you can do the things you want to do.
Oh, yeah? Well, my mother loves me 25% less than your mother.
Love your family 25% less with Fleischmann's Light. 25% less saturated fat, salt, and calories than regular margarine. And zero cholesterol. Fleischmann's Light.
To find a great new coffee, you could search the quaint back alleys of New Orleans' French Quarter, the gourmet coffee shops of New York's Upper West Side, or the cobblestone hills of San Francisco, and still you won't find a gourmet coffee like Gourmet Supreme, an entirely new Folgers you can get right in your own market. It's rich, mountain-grown Colombian, made smooth, less bitter, by blending with select gourmet beans for an enticing aroma and gourmet taste. And you don't have to search for a gourmet coffee shop.
You really brighten your day when you started out gourmet. The best part of waking up is Folgers in your cup.
Gourmet Supreme, in the black can, new from Folgers.
Tonight, another in our series we're calling The Best of Us. Our look at 5 remarkable Americans. None of them are stars. Each of them is worth our attention because they see the terrible national problems we all know exist, the problems of disease and poverty and injustice, and these Americans put the time of their lives on the line trying to right those wrongs, which makes them among the best of us. Hard by the Mississippi River, just over the Sunshine Bridge between Baton Rouge and New Orleans, lies the friendly town of Donaldsonville, Louisiana. Population 8,000. They had to plow through fields of sugarcane to carve out the Donaldsonville Elementary School. Enrollment, 725 children, most of them black. You would know it by looking at it that this little country school is up front in the nation's fight against illiteracy. 2 years ago, it began a reading project so innovative, so very basic, that educators all across the country are talking about it.
Brown bear, what do you see?
Called Parents as Partners, the project is the invention of Patricia Edwards, a professor of education and a reading expert.
I see a red bird looking at me. If you're reading a book that the child doesn't like, does the child get anything from the book?
While teaching at Louisiana State, Pat Edwards devised a program to combat illiteracy by teaching poor and undereducated parents how to read to their children. We asked Dr. Edwards, who just left LSU, to come back to Donaldsonville and the program she created.
And book reading is a time that you can have that intensive interaction with your child.
I can't dig
At Donaldsonville Elementary, up to 40% of the parents possess low literate skills.
I am this big. How big are you?
Their children are likely to suffer because of it. Who is responsible for this cycle of illiteracy?
The parent. The buck starts and stops with the parent. Even if the parent is illiterate, the buck starts and stops with them. The parent is the child's first and most important teacher, and especially the child's first and most influential teacher of reading.
That's the key. Education is the key.
Every Wednesday morning, Mildred Woods maneuvers her school bus through the decaying streets of Donaldsonville, picking up a highly motivated group of passengers. Women determined to improve their own reading ability and the skills of their children.
Look at the men on the corner. The women get out and go.
There is Hattie Terrence and Pat Navarre and Margaret Johnson and Linda Williams, all problem readers, all riding the bus to a better life for them and their kids.
Down to dinner, and what did I see? My aunt had invited a camel to tea.
Someday you may have a robot in your home. It could do all your work.
Don't you try to read some of the things in the book right now?
Difficult, yeah.
It's going to be kind of difficult.
Pat Edwards instructs Gloria Hayes.
You recognize any words in that book? What about this one? You can't recognize any words in that book. I want you to get disappointed or disgusted, okay? Because there's, like this book right here might be too difficult, but you can still work with your child at home.
What am I doing?
5-year-old Samantha Hayes, Gloria's daughter, attends Nina Couch's class for slow learners.
Samantha's a very quiet child. It takes a lot to motivate her. They don't have the literacy materials in their homes. They've never had books. They've never had pencils to write.
My daughter would come up to me and ask me to read a book to her, but I wouldn't know how to read it to her.
I'm not going to give up on a mother like Gloria because I know there are a lot of Glorias around the country.
There are millions of Glorias, in fact. People, black and white, doomed by illiteracy to lives of poverty and ignorance. Often it's a legacy passed from one generation to the next.
The Parents as Partners program at Donaldsonville Elementary School will help you and your child get on the train. I'm talking about the train toward literacy.
Pat Edwards caught the literacy train early in life. She remembers as a child helping her father read. She grew up with books, got a doctorate in education, and now teaches at Michigan State. She's about to publish her Parents as Partners project so that other schools can implement reading programs.
I like helping people, and it's important for me to make a difference. I think that I have made a difference on some people.
He'll write with a pen. Then he'll want to hang his picture on your refrigerator. And he'll probably ask you to read him a what? The story.
Patricia Edwards in Donaldsonville, Louisiana. Part of our world tonight. Dan Rather for the CBS Evening News. See you tomorrow. Good night.
I'm Harry Smith.
And I'm Kathleen Sullivan. Tomorrow, financial survival for women on their own.
Also, Glenn Close on her new movie, Immediate Family, on CBS this morning.
This is CBS.